The Spirituality Now podcast is sponsored by Delaflor Teachings International, a spiritual and systemic coaching and consulting company with the mission to help individuals, businesses, and corporations create brilliant futures through sustainable transformation. Also sponsored by the Network for Human Empowerment, a philanthropic TV network that serves Spanish-speaking communities with free, conscious education aimed to empower individuals to become the best versions of themselves. And our podcast producer, Ascend Media, Authority Syndication, delivering premium video marketing, podcast production, and social syndication.
Welcome to the Spirituality Now podcast, a podcast committed to supporting you in your journey to life mastery and personal enlightenment. Welcome to the Spirituality Now podcast. I am your host, your really happy host right now, not always, really happy, really joyful, really Mexican sometimes too, and really human, Yvonne de la Flor. I am so excited to have you back in here, wherever you are listening to us. Remember, we are on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Spotify, Google Podcast, Amazon Podcast. You can even tell your robot, Alexa, play the Spirituality Now podcast episode, whoever is your favorite or whoever you want to listen to. And the only thing we ask, remember, this podcast is philanthropic. We don't charge, we don't sell. We just ask you to share it, to subscribe, to share us. If anything that we share serves you, please just share it accordingly. That's the only kind of fee. It's not a fee, but it's a very it's a good exchange energetically. Anywho, so today I have back one of my favorite human angels, beings, spirits, soulmates in the world, literally. He has been in our podcast before, but he has been in our podcast when our podcast used to be called Sovereign Futures, and it used to be first bilingual. We used to do English, and I will translate in the podcast. So imagine if the podcast was 20 minutes, it would became 40 minutes because I will be translating, etc. Then we shifted into Sovereign Futures being only English, and now we just went to the next quadrant. I'm going to share this word because this is what the podcast is about. And now it's called the Spirituality Now podcast. We also have podcasts with our guests in Spanish only, for those of you who like to hear in Spanish podcasts. In our podcast called Human Empowerment, el podcast de empoderamiento humano, that's only in Spanish, en español. Anywho, let me just get into the mode, because today our theme is the Quadrant of Evolution. And I really think this is life-changing, mindset-altering, evolutionary awakening. It's a very powerful methodology, system, download, upload, high-level frequency teaching training from our guest, Mr. Alex Slucki. And let me share a little bit about him, just a little bit, because he's so prolific that, we have to summarize his prolificness into few words. Alex Slucki is a renowned author, lyricist, visual artist, script writer, composer, mentor, and speaker. His multi-layer reality shows and allows him to always be in the process of creative self-actualization, which he generously shares with the world at large. For more than 25 years, his natural psychic abilities have led him to work in several fields, such as channeling, light beings, and guides. He also has a unique style for the interpretation and teachings of tarot, to connect to our souls and develop the fullness of our human potential. He has developed many different programs. And when he says many, the bio says many, it's like thousands. It's not like 1 or 5 or 10. It's unbelievable the amount of programs that he has developed and created to help people thrive, such as the program called Soul Sequencing, the Integral Transformation System, and the Anatomy of Co-Creation. He's the author of several books which have reached bestseller category on Amazon in both fantasy and nonfiction, personal evolution categories. He wrote the script for the spiritually inclined Mexican musical Regina, and actually it won awards. I was in the 100 representation. He's an incredible artist, also photographer, and just an impeccable human being. With that said, my beloved friend Alex, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for the introduction, honey. I'm very happy to be here once again.
I'm more happy because we're going to talk about your, I don't know if it's a program more than really like a lifetime. This is, I think, life-altering, life-changing. We're going to talk about the Quadrant of Evolution. So why don't you tell us a little bit? Let's just get into it. What is this Quadrant of Evolution? And why is it, how did it start? How did you ever even created the Quadrant of Evolution?
I have to say the quadrant was almost like a download, very matrix type when you're just very much in the allowing and receiving mode. And suddenly I got this quadrant overnight. And I was working with a client actually who had been struggling a lot with her health. And we'd been working for more than a year. And one of the techniques that I use, Yvonne, is I channel the messages from the universe. I like to call it universe because so many words have been used to channel this kind of energy. You can call it God, higher intelligence. There's many names for it, but I call it universe because this is where we come from. We're from this universe. And when I do this technique to just connect and understand what my client needs, I start getting very concise and very direct information. And that particular day, I was a little bit fed up of listening to these complaints. I was going like, okay, my usually my techniques, they shouldn't last more than 2-3 months. And this has been a client that I've been working with ongoing. And I go like, okay, we need to understand what's the root of this situation and why this client in particular is not progressing the way my vision allows to see potentially. So I said, what is behind all this? What's going on with her health that we cannot advance? And this is where I was explained very, very quickly, like in a flash, this quadrant that has 4 stages of our evolution in consciousness. And each of the stages actually situates you like a map regarding emotions, regarding attitudes, basic or primary words that allow to understand where we are found in this quadrant very quickly. And you can actually name it, okay, this person is in quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3 or 4. And it really helped in the process of the client, understanding why it was that she couldn't get rid of the health issues, no matter what I did, because I used a lot of different techniques. I've always confided, I've trusted the process because people, they begin sessions very quickly. And in my ideal experience, they should be free of the need for more sessions, maybe.
I love that about you. Yes. Yeah. So they don't depend. They don't depend on us as a crutch or as a, Yeah.
I'm not a fan of codependency, honestly.
No. Neither am I. And I also love that you said I was fed up because of complaints. You and we have an allergy to complaints.
Yeah.
Each time I hear a complaint, it's like if you are complaining, you better be able to do something about it, or I create something around it. Actually, a lot of my businesses comes from the complaint of people. So it has been very prosperous. Anyways, honey, let's go over the quadrant. Let's go over the quadrant because let's go over the quadrant because I made some notes and I really want people to be able to go through this. But let's talk about the quadrant and then let's talk about how it will apply in certain circumstances.
Right.
But
and I strongly recommend that you who is listening also take notes because there's some what I call primordial convictions, and it's very, very simple. That's what I love about this quadrant. It's very simple to understand. You'll know exactly where you stand as soon as you hear this information. So we're moving from lesser levels of consciousness.
Yes. So let me ask you something. I have some questions that I need to ask you. So
of course.
The first quadrant, and I'm just, we're not going to talk about all of what is in the quadrant because I want people to be able to reach out to you.
Yes.
But the first quadrant speaks about survival. Tell us why and how, who are the people that fit into the quadrant of survival?
Okay. People who fit into the quadrant of survival may have experience very early in life or maybe later, but at some point in their lives, they felt extremely, extremely menaced regarding a certain situation. When it's in the first years, maybe they didn't receive what they needed in order to thrive, and they felt very unwelcome at home, or they felt like there was danger at home or in their environment. So they come to the conclusion that survival is directly associated to the idea of harm. That means you harm me, you're harming me. So in order for me to survive, I'm going to have to harm you. Either I move away, but that's quadrant 3, or I defend myself. This is fight. You remember the fight or flight, from the reptilian survival system. This is deeper because now I have the attitude is if you harm me in any way, I'm going to harm you. But if you don't harm me, I'm going to try to harm you before you do. So it's very, very, very defensive. And I have to say, I have an example. I have a neighbor here. I've never talked to him because I'm not in his coordinates. We've never come face to face. But sometimes in the neighborhood chat, you get people going like, don't talk to this guy because he's really defensive. No matter what you say, you can say good morning and he's going to bark, So, and there's a motor power, or I'm using a term that in Spanish is fuerza motriz, is like a driving force. And the driving force in this quadrant is vengeance. Why? Because vengeance speaks about if you do something to me, regardless of why it happens, I'm going to do it back to you. I don't trust myself, but I don't trust you. Okay? There's too much pain in existence. I don't believe in myself, and I don't believe in you. So it's very, very dark. It's like entering a dark room and expecting the worst. And people who are in the survival mode, I would like to believe there are the fewer in this planet, but we know there's a lot of people who are not thriving. They're surviving. So it's very aggressive. You do something to me, I'll do something to you. So that's the first quadrant.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. And I've seen, I've seen people that usually in that quadrant, I bet that people are not open to feedback. They take things personal. They go into attack, defense mode. Mm-hmm. Yes. So tell me about quadrant number 2. The quadrant number 2, which we are talking about egotism.
Yeah. What's really interesting about moving from 1 to 2 is that heard from and seen from outside, it may not seem like there's a lot of evolution there, but I have to dare say that it's a major step forward, even though if you're in quadrant 3 or 4, it's not going to seem that way. So I have to say that because egotism has also a driving force, which is mezquindad. How would you translate that?
Yes, like mezquino. What are the? Let's try to find out. What are the attitudes of someone that is mezquino?
It's like meanness or stinginess.
Yes, stinginess, and you know what? Where do the people that are like takers fit in? Like the taker, like I'm not gonna pay the less.
I got the word. It's pettiness.
Oh my gosh. I'm allergic. I don't want to be in that quadrant.
No. So there's a primordial conviction here. I'm going to benefit myself, but I'm going to harm you. So I'm not going to harm myself through you. Oh, because the first quadrant, one thing that is really important is I harm you, you harm me, but there's also a I harm me. I do harmful things to myself, right? In the second one, does it represent evolution?